Her fist came out of nowhere, fast, brutal. I stumbled backward, crashing into the cake table. Frosting smeared across my dress. Someone screamed. Cameras turned. She stormed up, eyes wild, and grabbed my arm. "Give me the keys," she hissed. "Now." My purse hit the floor. She kicked it open. Guests froze mid-bite. My son didn't stop her. He didn't even blink. Was this a nightmare? It was her wedding day, and I was being attacked by my new daughter-in-law. But why? What secret did she think I was hiding behind that locked door? If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying AMEN below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. The punch came so suddenly, I didn't even have time to flinch. 1 second I was standing there with a polite smile, trying my best to blend into the background of my son's wedding celebration, and the next her fist struck the side of my face with a force that rattled my bones. My glasses flew off, landing with a sharp crack on the hardwood floor of the Mackey House ballroom, scattering into broken shards under the golden light of the chandeliers. There were 130 guests in the room, every single one of them suddenly frozen, mid-laughter, mid-toast, mid-dance. The silence was louder than any scream I'd ever heard. My cheek burned like it had been branded, but it wasn't the physical pain that made my knees tremble. It was something deeper, a crack, loud and final, right in the center of my chest. Madison Maddie, my brand new daughter-in-law, stood there, panting slightly, her wedding gown as pristine as her rage was ugly. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she spat. Her voice echoed off the walls, slicing through the stunned quiet like a blade. "A woman your age doesn't need a whole apartment to herself. Caleb and I deserve space to start our life." I crouched down slowly, hands shaking as I gathered the broken remains of my glasses. No one helped. Not a single person moved. Some guests looked away, suddenly interested in the tablecloth. Others whispered behind manicured hands. And my son, my Caleb, just stood there. He didn't speak. He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed on the floor, as if I had disappeared completely. "You're not welcome in our life anymore," Maddie continued, smoothing down her veil like nothing had happened. "We need your apartment while we look for something bigger. It's time you moved on." My mouth opened, but no sound came. My mind had gone blank, my body stuck in some cruel dream. I stood up slowly, clutching the pieces of my glasses in my palm. I could feel blood where the plastic had cut into my skin. I could feel eyes on me, 100 eyes, watching the old woman get humiliated in public like some tired prop in a soap opera. I walked out of that ballroom without a word. Every step echoed like a drumbeat, my heart pounding in my ears. My feet carried me to the parking lot on pure instinct, away from the string lights and soft jazz and the clinking of champagne glasses. Outside, the air was thick with Georgia heat, but I shivered. I leaned against the hood of my car, my old, loyal Buick, and stared up at the black sky. That punch, it wasn't just the culmination of one bad night, it was the last push after months. No, years of quiet cruelty, of being made to feel like a burden in the very life I helped build. For a long time, I'd played the role well. Frances Whitmore, just Fran, to most people, the soft-spoken widow, retired, living simply in her modest apartment on Abercorn Street. I clipped coupons. I worked part-time at a flower shop, not because I needed the money, but because I liked the scent of roses in the morning. I wore thrifted clothes and drove a 10-year-old car. I let Maddie's snide remarks slide. Her jabs about my outdated furniture and ancient wardrobe were easier to swallow than rocking the boat. But that punch? That was the moment something inside me snapped clean. I opened my old purse, the same one Maddie once mocked for looking like something from a Civil War museum, and pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled as I dialed a number I hadn't called in over a year. I had hoped I'd never need it. "Gregory, it's Fran," I said when he picked up. "I need you to come to the Mackey house. Bring the folder. It's time." There was a pause on the other end. Then his calm, steady voice replied, "Are you certain, Mrs. Whitmore? Once we go forward, there's no undoing it." I looked back toward the glowing windows of the ballroom, where Maddie was probably laughing again, already telling guests some twisted version of the story. Caleb, I was sure, would still be frozen in place, letting her write the script of their future while erasing me from their past. "I've never been more certain of anything," I said. And I meant it. 30 minutes. That's all it would take. 30 minutes, and everything they thought they knew about Frances Whitmore, about the quiet little widow who clipped coupons and drove a dusty Buick, would come undone. They thought they were cutting me out of their lives tonight. But in truth, they had just set me free. 30 minutes. That's how long I sat in my car, staring at the glowing windows of the ballroom, the sound of distant laughter drifting toward me like smoke from a fire I couldn't put out. Every few seconds, a burst of applause or clinking glasses reminded me of the world I had just been violently ejected from, a world that, until now, I thought still had room for me. I kept one eye on the gravel drive, waiting for Gregory's headlights to appear. It was strange, the way clarity came after a moment like that. You would think I'd be spinning with anger, with humiliation, but I wasn't. I wasn't even crying anymore. I felt still, like a lake after a storm. They had no idea who I really was. For years, I played the part. I smiled through Maddie's fake kindness, let Caleb's distance pass without comment, and nodded along when they dropped hints about me moving into a retirement lifestyle community. Their words. Never home. Never your new place. No, always a community. So sterile, so impersonal, so calculated. But that wasn't the part that cut me. It was Caleb, my only son. The boy I raised with everything I had. The boy who used to make me macaroni necklaces and say I was the prettiest lady in the world, who now couldn't even meet my eyes as his wife assaulted me. I had been hoping, praying, that he would come to his senses, that the man I raised would wake up, but tonight proved that whatever part of him still remembered who he used to be, it was long gone. My phone buzzed beside me. A text from Claire, my niece. I saw what happened. "Are you okay? Do you want me to come out?" Bless her. Sweet, stubborn Claire. I could already picture her face, probably red with anger, biting her tongue at her table. She'd been suspicious of Maddie since the day they met. So had I, to be honest. But when it's your son's happiness on the line, you give people chances. You swallow your doubts. You let yourself believe you're wrong, even when every instinct in your body is screaming otherwise. I typed a quick reply. "I'm okay. Sit tight, something's coming." At exactly 31 minutes past the call, a familiar black SUV turned onto the driveway. I recognized Gregory's steady hands on the wheel. Always punctual, always prepared. He parked beside me, stepped out with his briefcase under one arm, and nodded. "Evening, Fran," he said, calm as ever. "Evening," I replied. "No second thoughts?" I shook my head. None. He opened the briefcase on the hood of my car. Inside was the folder. Thick, tabbed, pristine. The weight of truth, bound in leather and paper. Gregory pulled out a few documents and handed them to me. "Just so you know what you're about to do. First, the cancellation of all financial support to Caleb Whitmore, direct and indirect. Second, the withdrawal of your lease guarantee on their current apartment. Third, the notice to the ballroom full cancellation of the event guarantee, effective immediately." I stared down at the pages. So clean, so official, so final. "This is going to hurt them," I murmured. Gregory looked at me, his expression softening. "They've been hurting you for years, Fran. All you're doing is letting them face the consequences." I signed the first page. My hand didn't even shake. We walked together toward the ballroom, each step echoing through the gravel like the tolling of a bell. I felt something rising in me. Not fear, not anger, but power. Not the kind that comes from money or status, but the kind you get when you finally stop being afraid of losing people who don't care if they lose you. The doors were still open. The music inside was loud again, jazz spilling out into the night. Gregory held the folder in front of him like a badge, and together we stepped inside. It was like someone had hit a mute button the second we entered. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Some people blinked in surprise. Others looked away, embarrassed, maybe remembering that they hadn't moved an inch when Maddie hit me. My son stood near the cake table, talking to one of Maddie's cousins. Maddie herself was twirling for photos, all grace and glitter, surrounded by friends who laughed a little too loudly. When she saw me, her smile froze. "What the hell are you doing back here?" she snapped, stepping forward. "Didn't you embarrass yourself enough already?" Gregory stepped in front of me, calm and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising his voice just enough to carry. "Apologies for the interruption. I'm Gregory Miles, Mrs. Whitmore's financial and legal advisor. I have urgent matters to discuss with Mr. Caleb Whitmore and Mrs. Madison Kerrigan Whitmore." A collective hush fell. You could hear the air conditioner hum. Caleb walked over, looking more confused than concerned. "Gregory? What's going on?" Gregory didn't flinch. He pulled out the first document. "Effective immediately, Mrs. Frances Whitmore has withdrawn all financial guarantees on your current lease, including the security deposit and monthly assistance. Your landlord will receive this document tomorrow morning. You have 30 days to find a replacement guarantor or vacate the premises." Caleb bawled. "What?" he breathed. But Gregory was already moving on. Additionally, the $4,200 per month in personal support payments, including rent, car payments, credit card coverage, and wedding expenses will cease as of midnight tonight. Now it was Maddie's turn to speak. "That's ridiculous. She doesn't have that kind of money. Look at her. She works at a flower shop, for God's sake." I stepped forward then, looking her in the eye. Appearances can be deceiving, Madison. Gasps. Real, audible gasps. People turned in their chairs. Phones appeared in hands. Gregory continued. "Lastly, the financial guarantee for this evening's event, totaling $47,000, has been revoked. The venue is entitled to immediate compensation or may suspend services until payment is rendered." There was a long, stretching pause. Caleb looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. Maddie opened her mouth, then shut it again, her face twitching as she processed what was happening. "This isn't real," she said. "She's bluffing. She's trying to humiliate us." "Funny," I said quietly. "That's exactly what you did to me." I looked out at the crowd. So many faces. So many people who had once called me Aunt Fran or Miss Whitmore. People who had sat in my living room, eaten my pot roast, told me they admired how I raised Caleb. None of them had said a word when Maddie punched me. But now? Now they leaned forward. Now they were interested. I turned back to my son. "I paid for this wedding, Caleb. Every flower, every bite of food, every song the band plays tonight. And I did it quietly, because I loved you, because I wanted you to be happy. But you let her treat me like garbage. You watched her hit me. You didn't even flinch." Caleb's mouth opened. "Mom, I didn't." "No," I said sharply. "Don't explain, just listen." I took a deep breath. "I've lived simply, yes. I've worked in a flower shop. I wear old clothes. I drive an old car. Because your father and I made a choice decades ago to live modestly, to keep our wealth private, and to protect our family. You thought I had nothing, and that made it easy for you to dismiss me. But the truth is, I've spent the last 3 years quietly covering your debts, bailing you out, keeping you afloat." A murmur rippled through the guests. "I did it out of love," I said. "But love doesn't mean letting yourself be abused." Then I looked at Maddie. "And you're about to learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Gregory closed the folder and stepped back. I didn't need him anymore. I stood tall, straighter than I had in years. "This wedding ends tonight," I said clearly. "The lies, the manipulation, the entitlement, it all ends tonight." And with that, I turned around and walked out the door, leaving behind the wreckage of a celebration built on greed and stepping into the quiet, dignified night of my own liberation. I didn't look back. As I stepped out of the Mackey house that night, leaving behind the stunned silence, the stares, the open mouths and raised phones, I felt like I had just walked out of a burning building. My hands were steady. My breath was calm. And yet, every part of me knew that I had just changed the course of my life forever. Gregory didn't say much as we walked to our cars. He was never one for unnecessary words, and I appreciated that about him more than ever now. Before we parted, he handed me one last envelope. "These are the final papers, Fran. I'll take care of the notices tomorrow. You just take care of yourself tonight." I nodded, holding the thick manila folder like it was something sacred. "I'll be all right," I said. He gave me a look, the kind that said he wasn't entirely sure that was true, then got in his car and drove away. I sat in my Buick for several minutes before starting the engine. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed a moment to process what I had just done, what they had forced me to do. Inside that envelope were the first steps to severing every financial tie I had to my son, my only child. For years, I had justified the help I gave him, telling myself that it was temporary, that he was just going through a rough patch, that marriage and love were complicated, and I couldn't see everything from the outside. But deep down, I had known. The late-night credit card payments, the surprise bonuses that always coincided with their emergencies, the apartment lease that magically got renegotiated after I made a quiet call. All of it had been my doing. I had been patching holes in a ship they were punching holes into, over and over again. But no more. That night, back in my apartment on Abercorn Street, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my old desk, the one Henry and I bought when Caleb was in high school, and spread out every document I had. Bank statements, emails, screenshots, receipts, legal correspondence. I organized them into folders, labeled them clearly. One for the lawyer, one for Gregory, one for myself, and one for Claire. My niece was the only one in the family who had reached out to me that night. She texted twice more before midnight, both messages filled with quiet worry and fierce loyalty. I hadn't replied yet. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to someone that you've just disinherited your own son, that you've walked away from the only family you had left? The next morning, I was up before dawn. I made a strong pot of coffee and called my neighbor, Ron. Ron Blake lived in the apartment next door, a retired mechanic with a loud laugh and a soft spot for anyone who brought him donuts. He'd become something like a brother to me after Henry died. We didn't talk about everything, but we understood each other, and he'd seen more than most. Including the time Maddie brought an appraiser by the building, when she thought I wasn't home. He answered on the second ring. "Morning, Fran," he said. "Heard some fireworks last night." I laughed, a short, dry thing. That's one way to put it. There was a pause. "You okay?" I hesitated. "I think I finally am." He came over 10 minutes later, holding a box of pastries and a newspaper. We sat on my balcony, the summer morning already warming the air around us, and I told him everything. The slap, the silence, the reveal, the fallout. He didn't interrupt. He just nodded, sipped his coffee, and let me speak. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Well," he said, "remind me never to get on your bad side." I smiled, for the first time in what felt like days. "You'd have to try really hard." We sat in silence for a while after that. Birds chirped somewhere nearby. The city woke up around us, and for the first time since the wedding, I didn't feel alone. Later that afternoon, Claire showed up. She knocked once, then pushed the door open without waiting like she used to when she was a teenager visiting for the weekend. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes tired, but her jaw was set with the same stubborn determination that had always made her my favorite. "I brought you food," she said, holding up a brown paper bag. "Also, I may have yelled at Uncle Caleb in front of 10 people this morning. Just a heads up." I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't." She shrugged, unapologetic. "He deserves worse." We sat at the kitchen table. She pulled out 2 sandwiches, 2 bottles of iced tea, and a stack of napkins. For a while, we just ate. No heavy talk, no drama, just turkey on rye and shared silence. When we finished, she finally said, "You want to talk about it?" And I did. I told her everything, even more than I'd told Ron. About the years of slow disrespect. The way Maddie picked at me, day after day, like she was peeling away my dignity with every passive-aggressive remark. About how Caleb had changed, how he started echoing her words, how his love for me had become conditional on my usefulness. Claire listened. She didn't cry. She didn't get angry. She just took my hand and held it tight. "They don't deserve you," she said softly. I nodded. "Maybe not, but it still hurts." "Of course it does." She stayed late into the evening. Before she left, I gave her one of the folders. The one labeled Truth. "What's this?" she asked. "Everything," I said. "Every document, every transfer, every lie I covered for them. In case something happens to me, I need someone else to know." Claire hugged me so tightly, I thought my ribs might crack. "You're not going anywhere," she whispered. "But I'll keep it safe." Oh, after she left, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not out of regret. Not even out of grief. But out of release. Like I had been holding my breath for years and was finally able to exhale. That night, I slept. Really slept. The kind of sleep that comes after making a decision that aligns with your soul, even if it breaks your heart. In the days that followed, everything began to unravel for them. The ballroom called. Maddie and Caleb hadn't paid. The guarantee was gone. They were given 72 hours to cover the balance or face legal action. Their apartment complex notified them that the guarantor had withdrawn. With 3 months of back rent already piling up, they were given a 30-day notice. Their credit cards started bouncing. One by one, the financial dominoes fell. Gregory handled the legal side. I stayed out of it as much as I could, but Claire kept me updated. According to her, Caleb was spiraling. He blamed everyone but himself. Maddie stopped answering calls from her own mother. The house of cards was collapsing, fast. And then, something unexpected happened. A video. One of the guests, a teenager, I think had recorded the moment Gregory and I walked into the ballroom. He posted it online. It went viral. Not because of the scandal, but because of the speech. Me, standing there, telling the truth. Lifting my head with pride after being humiliated. People responded. Thousands of them. Comments poured in. Messages from strangers. From seniors who had been taken advantage of by their children. From women who had been belittled in their own homes. From men who had watched their parents suffer in silence. I became a symbol, I guess. Not a hero. Just a woman who finally said enough. I never expected to become a viral sensation at 68. And yet, there I was, sitting in my kitchen, bathrobe still on, hair pinned up with a pencil, watching a video of myself on a teenager's Instagram account as it crossed 200,000 views. It wasn't just the speech. It was the setting, the drama, the contrast. A quiet old woman standing in a silk blouse and flat shoes, speaking truth in a room full of sequins and lies. There I was, calmly dismantling my son's wedding with nothing but a folder and my voice. People didn't just watch it, they felt it. The comments were full of phrases like, "You're my hero," "reminds me of my grandmother," and "we need more women like her." But the ones that struck me the hardest were from people who had lived through the same thing. My daughter tried to move me into a nursing home so she could flip my house. My son forged my signature to take out a loan. My grandson got me to co-sign his car, then disappeared when he stopped paying. After, it was like a dam had broken. And suddenly, I wasn't just a mother with a broken heart. I was part of a silent army of older folks who had been manipulated, silenced, and pushed aside in the name of family. The local news station called the next day. They wanted an interview. I almost said no. I wasn't sure I had it in me to relive the moment again, but then I thought about all those people who'd written to me, people who were still in the middle of it, still being disrespected and drained. So I said yes. Claire came with me to the station. She held my hand in the green room and reapplied my lipstick when I got nervous. The anchor was a woman named Monica Rowe. Warm, professional, exactly the kind of person you want asking the hard questions. She began gently, asking how I was feeling. Lighter, I said truthfully. Not happier, not yet, but lighter. And then she asked the question that I knew would come. Why did you stay quiet for so long? I took a breath. Because I thought that's what love was, I said. Sacrifice, silence, putting others before yourself. That's how I was raised. That's how I raised my son. I didn't realize that I had slowly taught him that my boundaries were flexible, that my love came without limits, that my support was automatic, no matter how he treated me. Monica nodded. And what made you change? I looked into the camera. She hit me. I said simply, in front of my son, in front of our friends, and he did nothing. That's when I realized I was the only one keeping that family together. And I couldn't keep doing it if it meant losing myself. The interview aired that night. By the next morning, my phone was full. More messages, more stories. A voicemail from a woman in Ohio crying into the receiver, saying, "You said everything I wish I could have said to my son." But not all the messages were kind. Maddie's parents left a nasty voicemail accusing me of ruining their daughter's future. One of Caleb's former college friends sent a long email about how I had traumatized everyone at the wedding. An anonymous account sent me a message calling me a bitter old woman who couldn't let go. But those messages were few. The rest? Overwhelming support. The day after the interview aired, I got a call from a lawyer named Laura Sims. She specialized in elder financial abuse. She wasn't calling to offer her services, she just wanted to say thank you. "You don't know how many of my clients have cried watching your story," she said. "You gave them language. You gave them permission to fight back." Something shifted in me after that call. It wasn't enough to tell my story. I wanted to do something with it. So I called Gregory. "I want to set up a fund," I told him, "for older folks who need legal help. People like me who don't know where to turn." Gregory didn't hesitate. "I'll make the arrangements." We called it the Whitmore Fund for Dignity. Within a month, I had redirected the assets that were once intended for Caleb Properties, accounts, the beach house in Tybee Island, into a trust. Gregory handled the logistics. I handled the mission. And Claire? She quit her job. "I want to work for you," she said. "I want to build this with you." We turned my dining room into an office, bought a second-hand filing cabinet, started contacting local social workers and nonprofits. Word spread faster than we expected. Ron, my neighbor, volunteered to help drive seniors to appointments. Helen Duvall, my old real estate friend, joined to help with property disputes. Before long, we had a tiny team and a growing list of cases. And then came the letter that nearly stopped me in my tracks. It was from Caleb, handwritten, postmarked from a small town about an hour north. The handwriting looked tired, like it hadn't seen paper in years. He said Maddie had left him, that he was working part-time at a hardware store, that he was sorry, but not once did he say, "I was wrong." He said things like, "I didn't know it would get this bad," and "You embarrassed me," and "I wish things were different." But never, "I hurt you. I chose her over you. I let her hit you, and I said nothing." So I didn't write back. Claire asked if I was okay. "I'm fine," I said. "I just finally see him clearly." That was harder than the slap, in many ways. Letting go of the fantasy, the son I had in my head. The one I kept making excuses for. He wasn't gone, he had simply never become who I hoped he'd be. But someone else had stepped into that space. Her name was Marlene, 83 years old, fierce as hell, and full of stories. She came to us because her granddaughter had drained her savings. When she found out I had started the fund, she showed up with a cane in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. "You're the lady who told the truth," she said. "I want to do the same." We helped her recover most of her money. But more than that, we helped her write her story down. It was cathartic for her. It was healing. And it gave me an idea. What if we collected these stories? What if we created something real, a book, a series, a voice for the voiceless? Claire lit up. Yes. Let's call it When Love Hurts. It was perfect. 6 months later, we had a manuscript. A year later, it became a bestseller. People weren't just reading it, they were changing their lives because of it, setting boundaries, asking questions, saying no. And me? I was living the most honest version of my life I'd ever known. There was no mansion, no luxury car, no Instagram-perfect family photos. But there was peace. There was purpose. There was dignity. And somehow, that was enough. More than enough. They don't tell you that healing can be lonely. People talk about recovery like it's some beautiful arc, a rising slope of strength, resilience, triumph. But no one really talks about the long, quiet middle, the part where the storm has passed. The flood has receded, but you're still standing there barefoot in the mud, unsure of where to go next. That's where I found myself, about a year after the wedding. The fund was thriving. The book was on its 3rd printing. I'd spoken at 3 conferences, been featured in 2 national newspapers, and even sat across from Karen Fielding again for a follow-up interview. "You're an icon now," she told me with a warm smile. I just nodded, smiled, thanked her. But after the lights dimmed, after the applause quieted, I went home to an empty apartment with a kettle that whistled too loud and a couch that still sank slightly on Henry's side. Some nights, I missed my son so fiercely it made my chest ache. Not the man he'd become, but the boy he used to be. The one who collected rocks on Tybee Island, who begged for bedtime stories even when he was too old for them, who once wrote me a birthday card that said, "You're the best mom in the galaxy, even if you're not green like Yoda." I still had that card. Kept it in a drawer with Henry's watch and a faded photograph of us at our 25th anniversary. Ron noticed it first. "You're quieter these days," he said one afternoon on the balcony, passing me a mug of tea. "I suppose I am. In day. You okay?" I thought about lying. But I didn't. I'm proud of everything we've built. I just didn't realize how much of myself I'd have to leave behind to do it. He nodded like he understood, and I think he did. Ron had lost his wife to cancer years ago. He didn't talk about it much, but sometimes when the weather was just right, I'd see him sitting alone on the bench by Forsyth Park, staring at nothing, and I knew he was remembering her. That afternoon, he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I was saving this for your birthday," he said, "but I think you need it now." Inside was a folded brochure. Volunteer Getaway, Apalachicola, Florida. Rebuilding Coastal Communities. Seniors Welcome. He blinked. "You're trying to send me away?" He laughed. "No, Fran. I'm trying to remind you there's more to life than work and grief. Go hammer a nail, plant a tree, eat some seafood. You've earned it." End quote. I didn't say yes right away. But that night, I looked up Apalachicola, a sleepy little fishing town with old Victorian houses and sunsets that turned the Gulf gold. 3 weeks later, I packed a small suitcase and boarded a bus. The trip was uneventful, quiet, just the way I liked it. The town was even smaller than I imagined. One main street, a handful of restaurants, and a bay that stretched out like a mirror. My lodging was humble, a spare room in a widow's guest house, with floral curtains and a creaky ceiling fan. The volunteer project was run by a group called Hands Together. Mostly retirees, a few college kids, all here to help repair homes damaged in the last storm season. I didn't know a hammer from a wrench, but they put me on the garden team where I could plant flowers and pull weeds to my heart's content. It was the first time in a long time I didn't feel like the woman from the video. No one asked for my autograph. No one brought up Maddie or Caleb. I was just Fran, the lady who liked snapdragons and always had an extra bottle of sunscreen. And then I met Everett. He was tall, silver-haired, with sun-wrinkled skin and laugh lines that hinted at a life well lived. He was from Tennessee, had been a contractor before retiring, and had a laugh that made everyone else smile just by hearing it. We ended up on the same team, replanting a small front yard for a woman named Jolene. She had lost half her roof in the hurricane and was still waiting on insurance, but she cried over the marigolds we planted like we'd rebuilt her entire house. Everett handed her a tissue, patted her shoulder, and said, "Sometimes color is the best kind of healing." Later that day, as we were rinsing our hands with a garden hose, he turned to me and said, "You've got kind eyes." I laughed. That's an old line. Maybe, but it's still true. We started having coffee together in the mornings before the workday. He told me about his late wife, how they used to dance in the kitchen, how he still caught himself reaching for her hand in the middle of the night. "I thought I'd be angry forever," he said one morning, watching the sun rise over the bay. At the world, at God, at the people who never called after the funeral. But then one day, I realized I could carry the love without carrying the pain. I nodded slowly. "That's what I'm trying to learn, too." He looked at me, then really looked and said, "You're doing better than you think." The days in Apalachicola passed in a blur of soil and sweat and gentle laughter, and when the week ended, I found myself reluctant to leave. On our last night, the group had a potluck dinner by the docks. Someone brought a radio. Someone else lit candles in mason jars. Everett asked me to dance. There were no cameras, no crowds. Just the sound of water, the clink of silverware, and the rustle of Spanish moss in the breeze. He held me close, not possessive, not forceful, just kind. I didn't cry, but I thought of Henry, and I whispered a thank you to the stars, just in case he was listening. When I got back to Savannah, the apartment felt different. Not emptier, just ready. Like it had been holding its breath, waiting for me to return. Ron greeted me with a grin and a basket of muffins. Claire stopped by with new case files. The world picked up where it left off, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and maybe, just maybe, I was finally open to the possibility that there was more ahead than behind. When I got back from Apalachicola, I thought the hardest part of the journey was behind me. I'd planted new flowers in strange soil, danced to a song I didn't know, and for the first time in years, I had laughed without checking my surroundings first. There was healing in that town, quiet, sun-warmed, and salty, and I carried pieces of it back to Savannah like seashells in my suitcase. But life, as it often does, had its own timing. A week after I returned, I found a small envelope wedged between bills and circulars in my mailbox. The handwriting stopped me cold. I hadn't seen it in over a year, but I knew it instantly. Caleb. Inside was a letter shorter than the first, written in smaller, neater handwriting, as if he'd taken his time this round. I sat down on the steps of the apartment building, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement, and read, "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't even ask you to. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry, not just for standing there, or for letting her hurt you, but for all the years I let her change the way I saw you, the way I stopped protecting you, the way I stopped being your son. You didn't raise me to be that man. I just didn't have the strength to admit I'd become him. Maddie's gone. I let her go because I finally saw what you'd been seeing all along. She wasn't just using me. She was turning me into someone who could watch his mother be struck and still do nothing. I'm in therapy. I've started attending meetings for men rebuilding family relationships. They say it takes time. I believe them now. If you ever want to talk, even just once, I'll be here. No expectations, no guilt. Just your son, trying to remember how to deserve that title again. Caleb. I read it twice, then a third time. The first feeling that hit me wasn't relief. It wasn't even forgiveness. It was exhaustion. Not the kind that sleep cures, but the kind that settles in your bones, the weight of love stretched too thin for too long. Because part of me wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to ask him why now, to say all the things I hadn't said on that wedding night. But another part, the stronger, older, more tired part, just wanted peace. And maybe, after everything, those two things weren't the same. I folded the letter slowly, deliberately, and placed it in the same drawer where I kept his childhood birthday card and Henry's watch. Then I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the wind stir the trees on Abercorn Street. That night, I dreamt of Caleb as a boy barefoot in the backyard, holding a mason jar filled with fireflies, asking me if stars could get stuck in jars if you caught them fast enough. I woke up crying. The next morning, I called Claire. "Do you think people change?" I asked her as soon as she picked up. She was quiet for a beat. Then, "I think people can change, but I don't think everyone does. And even when they do, it doesn't mean we owe them anything. I got a letter from Caleb." She let out a breath. "Do you want me to come over?" I think I just needed to say it out loud. We sat in silence, the way people do when they've learned how to hold space for each other's ache. "I think," she said gently, "it's okay if you don't know what you want to do yet." And I didn't. That weekend, I went to the beach house in Tybee Island, the one I had nearly lost, the one Maddie had tried to sell behind my back. It had taken nearly a year to repair the damage, but now it stood firm again, white shutters blinking slowly in the sea breeze like old eyes finally waking. I spent 2 nights there, just me and the waves. No cell signal, no work emails, no interviews. Just me and the silence. On the second night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and opened the letter one more time. This time, I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger either. What I felt was distance, like I was reading the story of someone else's family, a story I used to be part of but no longer carried in my chest. I whispered, "I love you, Caleb, but I don't owe you my healing." And I meant it. When I returned to Savannah, the world hadn't shifted. Ron still brought over his crossword puzzles. Claire still showed up with coffee and updates on the fund. The apartment still smelled faintly of lavender and old wood, but something inside me had settled. A few weeks later, I wrote Caleb back. Just 1 page, typed, simple. "Dear Caleb, thank you for your letter. I believe you are trying. That matters. I want you to know that I loved you before all of this, and I still love you now. That hasn't changed. But love does not erase pain. It does not rebuild trust on its own. I don't know what our future looks like. I don't know when or if I'll be ready to talk. But I'm glad you're doing the work. For yourself. Not for me. Keep going. Mom." I didn't sign it with love. Not yet. But I sealed it, mailed it, and let it go. And maybe that, too, was a kind of healing. It's funny how life moves in loops. Just when you think the chapter is closed, some new corner of the page folds open, showing you there's more left to be told, more to be learned, more to be done. After I sent the letter to Caleb, I didn't expect anything to change. I wasn't waiting by the mailbox. I wasn't checking my phone. I had made peace with the silence, and peace, I'd learned, was often a quiet room with no answers and no need for them. Instead, I threw myself deeper into the fund. The Whitmore Fund had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We'd helped over 100 seniors reclaim stolen assets, secure safe housing, and reconnect with estranged family members when they chose to. The cases ranged from heartbreaking to infuriating, and every time I thought I'd seen the worst of it, a new file would land on my desk and prove me wrong. One Tuesday morning, Claire walked in with a manila folder and a tight expression. "This one's different," she said. I opened the file and immediately saw what she meant. Her name was Shirley Davenport, 74 years old, retired school teacher, lived alone in a modest duplex just outside Savannah. She'd been admitted to the hospital with a fractured wrist after a fall, but the nurses suspected more. A social worker finally stepped in after Shirley broke down and admitted her adult grandson had pushed her during an argument over rent money. He lived with her, had for years, but lately he'd been stealing her checks, pawning her jewelry, and yelling things that made the neighbors turn up their TVs. "She's scared to press charges," Claire said softly. "Says he's the only family she has left." I closed the folder and felt something inside me clench. Not rage, not exactly. Something deeper. Something maternal. Protective. "I want to meet her," We found Shirley in a rehab center just outside town. She was small, soft-spoken, with white hair pinned neatly behind her ears. When I walked into the room, she looked up like a child caught sneaking cookies, equal parts guilt and hope. "I saw you on television," she said. "The wedding lady." I smiled gently. "That's one name for it." She chuckled, a thin, papery sound. "You were brave." "I wish I were that brave." I sat beside her. "Tell me your story." And she did. Slowly, painfully, like pulling thorns from skin. Her grandson had moved in after his mother, Shirley's daughter, passed away. He was quiet at first, grateful, but grief twisted him. Or maybe it revealed him. The anger, the entitlement, the manipulations, they crept in like mold. "He tells me I owe him," she whispered, "that without him, I'd be dead already." I felt my jaw tighten. I reached out and gently took her hand. "You don't owe anyone your safety," I said. "Especially not someone who hurts you." Tears welled in her eyes. "But he's my baby." I raised him. "So did I whispered. I raised mine, too. She looked at me, then really looked, and I saw the recognition pass through her. The understanding that we weren't just women in different versions of the same pain, but survivors standing on the other side of it, choosing what came next. "I don't want him to go to jail," she said. "Then we won't start there," I replied. "But we will start." The next week was a whirlwind. Gregory got involved, as did a social worker named Tina, who had a heart like a freight train, quiet but unstoppable. Together, we arranged a protection order, froze Shirley's compromised accounts, and relocated her to a temporary assisted living apartment where she could recover without fear. Her grandson showed up at her door once, yelling, demanding access. But Ron, bless him, had volunteered to sit watch. He called the police before the young man could even step onto the porch. It was the first time Shirley slept through the night in months. A few days later, she sent me a card. "Dear Fran, you made me brave. Not because you fixed everything, but because you reminded me that I was worth fixing things for. Love, Shirley." I pinned it on the bulletin board in our little office next to a quote Claire had printed out months ago. "When you feel like you're drowning, sometimes all you need is someone who remembers how to swim." I wasn't just healing anymore. I was becoming someone else's lifeline. And that changed everything. We started hosting monthly gatherings, not just for legal support, but for storytelling. We called it the Second Circle. A place where older folks could sit, sip coffee, and share their stories. Not just the painful ones. The joyful ones, too. That's where I saw Shirley laugh for the first time. A real, full-bellied laugh that made her eyes crinkle and her shoulders shake. It's also where Everett showed up again. He walked in one Sunday with a box of muffins and a crooked smile. "I heard you were building something beautiful," he said. "Figured I'd bring breakfast." I hadn't seen him since Apalachicola, but we'd stayed in touch, letters, postcards, the occasional phone call. Seeing him in person again felt like someone turned the volume up on a song I hadn't realized I missed. We sat next to each other during the circle. When someone asked if anyone had a story to share, Everett raised his hand. "I do," he said. "It's not a story about survival. It's a story about starting again." And then he told the group about his wife, about loss, loneliness, and the unexpected joy of planting flowers with a stubborn woman who talked to tomatoes and believed lavender cured everything but heartbreak. I blushed. He winked. The group clapped. Later, as we cleaned up, he offered to walk me home. We strolled through the warm dusk of Savannah, the streetlights flickering to life one by one. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked. "Always." "And?" I smiled. "I think I'm ready to find out." We stopped at my gate. He didn't kiss me, not yet, but he took my hand, squeezed it gently, and said, "You're not just the wedding lady, Fran. You're the lighthouse." And that's when I realized, somewhere along the way, without planning it, I had become a home for other people's lost boats. Not because I had all the answers, but because I'd survived the storm, lit a lamp, and left the door open. The first time someone called me a fraud, it came in the form of a voicemail. A woman's voice, sharp and cold. You're not a hero. You're just another rich widow who finally snapped when her kids stopped calling. Don't act like this is some noble cause. It's revenge, plain and simple." She didn't leave her name. I listened to the message 3 times. Not because I believed it, but because part of me, the part that still flinched at confrontation, needed to be sure I didn't. It wasn't the first message like that. The more visible I became, the more opinions followed. Most were kind, generous, grateful, but a few were bitter, accusatory. They called me manipulative, ungrateful, unmotherly. You should have handled that privately. Family is family, no matter what. Shameful, airing dirty laundry for sympathy. The first few stung, but then, one morning, I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote down everything I'd done since that night at the Mackey house. Helped 127 seniors, Secours Legal Protection, recovered over $400,000 in stolen assets, sponsored housing transitions for 39 at-risk elders, built a network of volunteers across 3 counties, published a book that reached 1.3 million readers. And none of that, not a single piece, had come from revenge. It came from choice. I poured my grief into something useful. I took the rubble and made a road. And if people didn't understand that wasn't my problem anymore. Still, the doubts hung in the corners like cobwebs, until Everett said something that finally cleared the air. We were walking through the farmer's market on a warm Saturday, picking out peaches for the second circle brunch. He reached for a particularly bruised one, turned it over, and said, "Funny thing about bruises, people always assume they ruin the fruit." I raised an eyebrow. "You planning to make a point here?" He smiled. "Sometimes the bruised ones are sweeter. They've ripened longer, held on tighter." I looked down at the fruit in his hand. He placed it gently in the basket. "Don't let other people tell you how to carry your bruises, Fran. They didn't earn them." Later that evening, he made us cobbler from those peaches. It was a little too sweet, a little too soft, just like me, and I realized I had started to fall in love with a man who understood how to be gentle with what had been broken. But love at our age is not a wildfire. It's a slow-burning lamp in a quiet room. You don't chase it. You let it warm you, inch by inch, until one day you look around and realize the dark doesn't scare you anymore. I told Claire about Everett the next week. She grinned like a teenager and demanded every detail. "Do you think this is real?" I asked, quieter than I meant to. She squeezed my hand. "I think real doesn't care how old you are, or how late it shows up." It was Claire who nominated me for the City Award. I didn't know until the letter arrived in the mail. The Savannah Spirit Award, given annually to one citizen who exemplifies the courage, character, and compassion that defines the best of our city. End of quote. I laughed out loud when I read it, then cried. At the ceremony, they called me to the stage. I wore a navy blue dress, one I hadn't pulled out since Henry's funeral, and Everett stood in the wings, hands in his pockets, eyes shining. The room was full not just with people I knew, but people I had helped, people I hadn't seen in decades. And among them, in the back row, stood Caleb. He didn't wave, didn't smile. Just stood quietly, hands folded. As I stepped up to the microphone, I took a deep breath. "I never planned to be here," I began. "In fact, if you'd told me 2 years ago that I'd be standing on this stage, I would have laughed, or cried, or both." A soft chuckle ran through the room. "I'm not here because I'm special," I continued. "I'm here because I finally told the truth. And I want to say something to anyone in this room who thinks their pain isn't big enough, loud enough, or public enough to matter. It island." I paused. It took me nearly 70 years to realize that protecting others doesn't mean abandoning yourself, and that boundaries are not betrayal. They're an act of love, both for them and for you. Applause followed, gentle, steady. "I accept this award, not for being brave," I said, voice steady, "but for finally being honest, and I hope, wherever you are in your story, you give yourself permission to do the same." And when I stepped down, Everett met me halfway, took my hand, and kissed the back of it. No fanfare, No performance. Just quiet pride. Caleb was gone by the time we left the building. I didn't need him to stay. It was enough that he came. Later that night, back on the balcony with the stars above and the cobbler warming in the oven, Everett leaned over and said, "That speech? That was the woman I fell for." I smiled. "You fell for me?" He looked at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Hard and slow, like old trees falling in love with sunlight. I didn't see Caleb for 3 more months after the award ceremony. Not a call, not a text, not a word. And strangely beautifully, I didn't need one, because somewhere in that space between silence and peace, I had found a version of myself I thought I had lost years ago. Not the mother, not the widow, not even the wedding lady, just Fran. I had a morning routine again, real, not rushed. Tea on the porch, a walk through Forsyth Park, a trip to the flower shop twice a week, not because I needed the blooms, but because touching petals still reminded me of Henry. Everett and I had settled into something soft and sturdy. We weren't racing toward anything. We didn't need to. We had afternoons and shared glances and Sunday dinners with mismatched plates and too much butter. "I like this version of you," he said one evening as I danced barefoot in the kitchen to an old Patsy Cline record. I laughed. "You've seen other versions?" He stepped closer, kissed my cheek. "Only from a distance. This one's my favorite." And just like that, without any grand declarations or candlelit speeches, I knew I had fallen in love again. Not in the way I loved Henry. That love had been all fire and certainty and youth. This love? This was a warm quilt on a cold night, a knowing glance across a crowded room, a hand that didn't hold too tight, but never let go. I was happy. And that, in itself, was a revolution. Then, one cloudy Thursday in late October, as I was preparing cinnamon scones for our next second circle gathering, the doorbell rang. I wiped flour from my hands and opened it, and there he was. Caleb, older, thinner, beard trimmed, eyes clearer than I'd seen in years. He was holding something, a canvas, wrapped in brown paper and string. "Hi, Mom," he said. I didn't speak. Not because I was angry, I wasn't, but because I suddenly didn't know what this moment was supposed to be. There had been so many imagined versions in my head. Tears. Yelling. A long, emotional hug. Instead, it was just 2 people standing in the doorway of a life they used to share. "I won't stay long," he said. I wanted to give you something." He handed me the package. It was heavier than I expected. I stepped aside, let him in. We sat in the living room. He didn't ask about Everett. I didn't ask about Maddie. Instead, I unwrapped the package. It was a painting. The beach house in Tybee Island. My beach house. But not how it looked now, how it looked then. The way it looked when Henry and I first bought it. The shutters freshly painted. The porch swing hanging straight. The azaleas in bloom. I stared at it for a long moment. "You painted this?" I asked softly. He nodded. "I've been taking classes. Part of therapy, I guess?" They said I needed a creative outlet. Something that didn't involve control or fixing things. "It's beautiful. I remember you used to sit on that swing and read with your feet tucked under you. You'd hum sometimes. Like you forgot we were there." My throat tightened. "I think I hated how peaceful you were," he said. "I didn't understand it. I thought you were avoiding us, but now I think you were just protecting something. Yourself, maybe." I looked at him. Not the boy. Not the man who had stood still while I was struck. But the version that sat before me, now open, imperfect, trying. "I was protecting what little I had left," I said quietly. He nodded. "I won't ask you for anything, Mom. I just wanted you to have that. I know it's not enough. It's not supposed to be. But it's a piece of what I remember. A piece I think you deserve to keep." I set the painting on the table, between us. "You're not the only one who's changed, Caleb," I said. I have too. I can see that. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not chasing old versions of people. I've learned how to let go. I know, he said, looking down at his hands. And I'm glad, really. There was a long pause, and then I said something I hadn't planned to say. I still love you. His head snapped up, eyes wide. But I'm not waiting for you to earn it back, because love, at least mine, isn't a reward. It's just a truth. You don't have to do anything with it. His voice cracked. Thank you. We didn't hug. There were no violins swelling in the background, just a quiet knowing between us, like the tide slowly smoothing over sharp stones. He left without asking when he could come again, and I didn't promise anything. But after he was gone, I hung the painting in the hallway across from the mirror where I brushed my hair each morning so I could remember two things: what I'd built and what I'd survived. There's a quiet kind of joy that comes with letting go of control. It's not dramatic, not cinematic. It's more like the slow settling of snow, barely noticeable until you look up one morning and realize the whole world feels softer. That's how it felt in the months after Caleb's visit. I didn't rush to rebuild our relationship. Neither did he. We exchanged a few letters, a birthday card. Once, he sent me a photograph of a painting he'd done, a woman sitting under a tree, face turned away, holding a book. He didn't say it was me. He didn't have to. But while the past was beginning to find its place, the present was expanding in quiet, beautiful ways. The Whitmore Fund had grown into something bigger than I ever imagined. What started as a desk in my dining room now occupied a full office suite downtown. We had 3 full-time staffers, 8 rotating volunteers, and a network of local legal, housing, and health professionals who showed up not because they had to, but because they believed in the mission. Claire had stepped into a new role, not just as the engine behind the operation, but as its voice. She had a gift for translating pain into action, story into structure. Watching her lead reminded me of what I must have looked like at her age. Sharp, hopeful, on fire. But with each passing month, I felt something shift in me. Not a pulling away, more like a passing of the torch. A gentle handoff I hadn't planned, but could feel in my bones. One morning, I stood in the middle of the office as Claire led a team meeting. She was talking about a grant application, gesturing toward a whiteboard filled with flowcharts and deadlines. I watched the way the others leaned in when she spoke, the way she held space, the way she let silence linger when someone needed it. She didn't need me to lead anymore, and for the first time, I realized maybe I didn't want to. That afternoon, I walked with Everett to the riverfront. The sky was pale and cloudless. Tourists ambled past with pralines and cameras, but I barely noticed. "I've been thinking about stepping down," I said. Everett didn't flinch, didn't offer advice. Just walked beside me, hands tucked in his jacket pockets. "From the fund?" he asked. I nodded. "Claire's more than ready. I want to go before I'm asked to, before I turn it into something that only makes sense to me." He glanced sideways. "And what would you do after?" I smiled. That's the question, isn't it? It had been decades since I asked myself what I wanted for me. Not for Henry, not for Caleb, not for a cause or a project or a name. Just me. The idea both thrilled and terrified me. Maybe I'd write again, I said. Or garden more. Or travel. End of travel. Or love, he added gently. I looked at him. Are you offering? He didn't answer right away, just took my hand. I'm saying the door's wide open, and I'd walk through it with you, if that's what you want. And for once, I didn't overthink it. I just said yes. Later that week, I called a meeting with the board. They were surprised, emotional, but not resistant. Claire cried, hugged me so hard my spine popped. Then, through tears, said, I promise I'll take care of it. Oh, I know, I said. I trust you. Completely. We agreed I'd stay on as a consultant, not gone. Just gently stepped back. Like a porch light still glowing, but no longer the first thing you see when you pull into the driveway. That night, I packed a small suitcase and booked a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Just me and Everett. 1 week. No emails. No meetings. No obligations. As we drove north on winding roads lined with amber trees, I felt something lift from my chest. Freedom. The kind I hadn't known since girlhood. The kind no one handed me, the kind I had finally chosen. At the cabin, we slept in, drank coffee slowly, read books under quilts, and watched deer wander past the porch. One evening, we danced to a crackling old jazz record on a deck lit with string lights we hung ourselves. "I think you're magic," Everett whispered in my ear as we swayed. I laughed. "I'm just old enough to know what matters now." He pulled back, looked into my eyes. "Then marry me," he said. The words hung in the air like the final note of a song. He blinked. Not because I hadn't thought about it, I had. But I hadn't expected him to say it. "Not like that. Not here. I'm not asking for a ceremony," he said quickly. "Not a party or a church or matching rings. I'm just saying, let's build the rest of whatever time we've got. Together." I took a long breath. "I don't need a ring," I said. "But I'd like one." He smiled. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that. Back in Savannah, we kept it simple. We told Claire first." She screamed. Ron offered to host a backyard gathering. Helen brought cupcakes. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't public. But it was ours. Standing under a canopy of string lights and Spanish moss, holding Everett's weathered hand, I said vows not about beginnings but about choosing again. About love that shows up late and still fits perfectly. And when we kissed, the world didn't shift. But my heart did. Into something new. Something soft. Something finally, truly whole. It started with an email. Subject line: "Your story deserves a bigger screen." At first, I thought it was spam, the kind that slips past filters and ends up sandwiched between newsletters and recipe coupons. But then I noticed the sender's domain, columbiapictures.com. I clicked it open, squinting at the screen like a skeptical librarian. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, my name is Tasha Lerner. I'm a producer at Columbia Pictures. I recently read When Love Hurts and watched your original interview. I was moved not just by your story, but by the grace with which you've chosen to live after it. We're exploring a limited series based on stories of resilience in later life, and yours resonated deeply. Would you consider a conversation?" I sat back in my chair, blinking. Everett peeked over his crossword. "You look like you saw a ghost." I handed him the laptop. He read, eyebrows rising. "Well, look at that. Hollywood comes knocking. I don't know what to think." He set the laptop down. "I think they're right. Your story does deserve a bigger screen, but only if it's told the right way." That night, I didn't sleep much. It wasn't fear. It was the weight of memory. The realization that someone strangers might walk around pretending to be me, Henry, even Caleb. That a version of our life, curated and scored and edited for emotion, might be played out for public consumption. Was I ready to hand it over? The next morning, I called Claire. She was ecstatic. "Fran, this is huge. Imagine how many people this could reach." "I know," I said. "But what if they twist it? Make it something it wasn't?" "Then you tell them the truth. You've been doing that longer than they've been making movies." She had a point. We set up a Zoom call with Tasha Lerner the following week. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s with curly hair, glasses, and a presence that felt more like a favorite niece than a Hollywood executive. She wasn't pushy. She didn't throw around buzzwords or dollar signs. She said, "We don't want to make you a character. We want to honor the real woman who changed lives." I listened. I asked question. I took notes. At the end of the call, she said, "This is your story, Fran. If we do this, you have creative say. You can change your mind at any time." I told her I needed time to think. She smiled. I'd expect nothing less. That evening, as I watched Everett water the porch plants with his usual care, I thought about what it meant to own your story, not just live it, but own it, shape it, share it. Maybe this was part of the healing, too. 2 days later, I said yes with conditions. No dramatization of the slap. No villainizing Caleb. No false endings. And no changing Savannah to some generic southern town. She agreed. And just like that, the wheels began to turn. Writers, producers, script drafts, contracts. Claire handled most of the logistics. Bless her. I approved outlines, corrected details. Said no to the actress they first suggested to play me. She's 25. I don't care how good her wig is, that girl has never known a hot flash in her life. End quote. Meanwhile, life carried on. The fund was thriving under Claire's direction. Everett and I started hosting dinner nights, just us and a few friends from the second circle. We laughed louder these days, cried less. The ache that used to hum beneath everything had quieted into something gentler. And then one afternoon, Caleb called. Not a letter, not a text. A real call. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice steadier than I remembered. "I heard about the series." "Oh, you watch Variety now?" He chuckled. "Someone sent me a link. I wanted to say I'm proud of you. Thank you." Pause. "I also wanted to ask something." "Here it comes." "I've been painting more," he said. "I'm teaching, actually. An art program for adults in recovery." "That's wonderful, Caleb." "There's a student. Her name's Melanie. 63. She's been sober 9 years. She paints like someone's fighting for her life. Her story, it's a lot like yours." I hesitated. "I'd like to connect her with the fund, if that's okay." It took me a second to realize what I was hearing. He wasn't asking for help for himself. He was paying it forward. "That's more than okay," I said. "Have her reach out." He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for months. "Thank you, Mom." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was growth. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen and let myself feel all of it. The grief, the pride, the bittersweet beauty of what happens when people finally choose to be better. Not perfect, just better. Later that night, Everett made tea. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I think so." "You think Hollywood will get it right?" "I think I will. Because this time, the story wasn't being taken from me. I was giving it. On purpose. On my own terms." They started filming in early spring. The production crew set up shop in Savannah, not a replica soundstage, but the real thing. The real streets. The real park benches. The breeze off the river that never quite stops moving. And that, I think, is when it hit me. This was really happening. They weren't just telling my story. They were walking it. The actress who played me, Ellen Pierce, was in her 60s, with the kind of grace that only comes from surviving something. When we first met, she took my hands in hers and said, "I've played queens and outlaws, but this is the first time I'm playing a woman I admire." I liked her instantly. They asked if I wanted to be on set. I said no at first. But curiosity got the better of me. I showed up one afternoon during a scene set at the beach house, or, rather, the rebuilt version they had dressed up to look as it did in 2023, before the slap, before the split, and there she was. Me, in a blouse I used to own, sitting on a swing with her eyes closed, humming the way I used to. I watched from behind a row of monitors, and something inside me cracked open. Note pain, note pride, recognition. That woman, fictional or not, had survived. And so had I. But not everyone shared that sentiment. About 2 weeks into filming, Claire came rushing into my apartment with her phone in her hand and worry written across her face. "You're not going to like this," she said. She handed me the phone. A video was playing low-res, shaky, shot on someone's phone at what looked like a bookshop. At the center was a woman I hadn't seen in over 2 years. Maddie. She was standing in front of a shelf filled with books, holding up When Love Hurts. Her hair was longer, darker. Her voice still carried that edge of condescension wrapped in sugar. "I just think it's important to hear both sides," she said to the camera. "You know, everyone praised her for being brave, but no one ever asked what it's like to have your wedding turned into a courtroom." She went on, twisting events, downplaying the slap, painting herself as the true victim, a woman who lost her husband, her family, and her reputation to a mother-in-law with a media machine. "I don't want revenge," she said with a practiced shrug. "I just want the truth." The video had over 400,000 views. Claire bit her lip. "We can issue a response, a statement. We can get ahead of it." I shook my head. "No, but Fran." "No," I said again, firmer this time. "She's doing what she's always done, manipulating the story to suit her needs. I won't do the same. The people who've walked this path, the ones who've lived through what I have, they'll see the truth." Claire looked at me, uncertain. "And if the series does what we hope it does," I added, "her words won't matter nearly as much as her silence should have that night." Still, the incident stirred up more attention than I was ready for. The studio got nervous. Emails started flying. Should we soften the portrayal? Should we add a disclaimer? Tasha called me directly. "We're still with you," she said. "But we're getting pressure to balance the story. Add nuance." "You don't need to change the facts to find nuance," I replied. "The truth is nuanced. Just don't sanitize it to protect someone who never protected me." She went quiet, then said, "I'll fight for that." And she did. Filming continued. But something shifted in me after that. I started re-examining everything, not just how the story would be told, but why I told it to begin with. Was it just to be heard? To warn others? To reclaim my life? Maybe all of it. But more and more, I realized it wasn't about Maddie anymore, or Caleb, or even the past. It was about what came next. One evening, Everett found me in the kitchen, staring into the oven like I'd forgotten what I was baking. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. Then, "Do you think I've become too much?" He leaned against the counter. "Too much for who? For the people who liked me better when I was quiet?" He smiled gently. "Fran, you were never meant to be quiet. You were just trying to survive." I looked at him. "And now?" "Now?" He touched my cheek. "You're living, loudly, as you should." That night, I wrote a letter to the crew. Not the producers, not the network. The crew, the lighting people, the costume team, the assistants who carried water and held umbrellas and made magic from the shadows. I thanked them for telling the story right, for treating it with care, for honoring not just me, but every woman like me. They framed it and hung it on set. Ellen texted me a photo. "They cried when they read it," she wrote. "You've changed more lives than you know." And maybe that was the point. Not to correct the record, but to change the future. The series premiered on a Sunday night in late September. We didn't host a party. No red carpet. Just me, Everett, Ron, and Claire gathered around my television with bowls of kettle corn and a few too many tissues. The pilot episode was quiet, haunting not just in what it showed, but in what it held back. That was the magic of it. The pauses. The silence between words. The way Ellen, playing me, would stare into a space no one else in the room could see and let the pain flicker across her face like candlelight. By the end, no one spoke. Claire wiped her eyes. Ron cleared his throat. Everett just reached over and held my hand. "I thought I'd feel proud," I whispered. "But right now, I just feel bare." "Because you were honest," he said. And honesty always costs something. What we didn't expect, couldn't have, was how big the response would be. Within days, the show became a phenomenon. Social media exploded. Viewers shared their own stories of abuse, silence, survival. Book sales tripled. The Whitmore Fund's website crashed twice in 1 week from the flood of new donors. Ellen was nominated for an Emmy after only 3 episodes. And me? They wanted interviews, podcasts, magazine covers, daytime television. I said no to most. Not because I wasn't grateful I was, but because I knew fame had a price and I'd already paid more than I could afford. Instead, I focused on the quiet things. My garden. The Sunday gatherings. A short essay I began writing. Not for anyone else, just for me. Then one morning, I woke up with a tightness in my chest. At first, I thought it was anxiety, the pressure, the attention. But as the minutes passed, it didn't fade. It spread. Everett was still asleep beside me. I didn't want to wake him, but I did. "Something's wrong," I said, voice thin. We got to the hospital just in time. It wasn't a heart attack. Not quite. The doctor called it unstable angina. A warning shot, a whisper from my body that I needed to slow down or it would make the decision for me. I stayed overnight. Everett refused to leave my side. Claire came by with soup. Ron brought crossword puzzles. Lying there, staring at the dull ceiling tiles and blinking monitors, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear. Permission. Permission to stop. Not just rest. Not just pause. But really stop. Stop proving. Stop performing. Stop trying to hold it all together. When I got home, I took a long bath, made a cup of chamomile, and opened the letter I'd been avoiding for weeks. It was from Caleb, handwritten. 3 pages. "Mom, I watched the show. All of it. I didn't know how to say this, so I kept putting it off. But now I think waiting is just another form of cowardice. You didn't lie. You didn't exaggerate. You showed the truth. And you did it without hate, without shame, without making me the monster I sometimes feared I'd become. Thank you for that. I know I've missed so much. And I don't expect to be part of your future just because I've finally faced the past. But if there's still a space, even a small one, for me to come by, have coffee, and just exist near you, I'd like to try. I'd like to know the woman you've become. And I'd like you to know the man I'm becoming. If that's too much to ask, I'll understand. But I had to ask. Love, always. Caleb." I folded the letter, poured a second cup of coffee, and called him. No speeches, just 4 words. "When can you come?" Caleb came on a Sunday afternoon. No fanfare, no grand gestures, just a man standing on the porch with a carton of lemon muffins and a paper bag of fresh coffee beans from the corner shop we used to frequent. He looked nervous. So did I. We didn't hug right away. We didn't cry. We stood there for a second, longer than was comfortable. 2 people who once shared everything now struggling to share air. But then I stepped back, opened the door and said, "Come in." That was the beginning. We didn't talk about the show. Not yet. We talked about little things. His classes, my garden, the new lilies that had finally bloomed, Everett's poor attempt at baking bread. "You're seeing someone," Caleb said gently, halfway through his second muffin. "Yes," he nodded. "You look lighter, happier." "I am." He took a breath. "I'm glad. Truly." Later, we sat on the porch. The sun filtered through the oak trees, casting dappled light across the wood. Caleb looked out at the street. "I hated you for a long time," he said. "I know. I thought you were judging me, controlling me. But now I think you were scared. And I didn't want to see it. I didn't speak. I let the words land. I blamed you because it was easier than blaming myself. And now, I still carry it," he said. "But not like before. Now it's just part of the story. Not the whole thing." I turned to him. "You were my boy. My soft-hearted, tender boy. I didn't know how to protect you once you stopped needing me." He looked down. "I think I stopped needing you too soon." Silence. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was old. Faded. Us at the beach house, him about 5 years old. Me in a straw hat. Both of us grinning like the world had never hurt us. "I kept this," he said. "All these years. Through everything. Even when I told myself I didn't care. I took it from him, fingers trembling slightly. "You want to come back?" I said. He nodded. "But only if there's room." I looked at him for a long moment, then said, "We don't rebuild the house. We plant a new garden where the old one used to be, 1 seed at a time." His eyes brimmed with tears. "I'd like that." And so we began again, not with declarations, but with Tuesday coffees, with slow walks in the park, with Sunday dinners where he helped set the table and Everett didn't flinch when their paths crossed. Over time, he met Claire, Ron, even Shirley, who scolded him gently and said, "You hurt her," And I'll put sugar in your gas tank, you hear? He smiled and said, "Fair enough." Meanwhile, the series had finished its run, 6 episodes, critically acclaimed, watched by millions. I did one final interview, then politely declined all further publicity. Tasha respected that. She sent me a small, engraved plaque. For living the story first, and living it well. I placed it next to Henry's watch, under the beach house painting Caleb had given me. One afternoon, Claire called with a new proposal. "Fran, we've had a donation. A big one. Anonymous. Enough to fund a scholarship, not just legal support, but full tuition for students over 50 returning to school after domestic hardship." I blinked. "You're serious? We want to name it after you. The Francis Whitmore Reclamation Fund." I didn't answer right away, because something inside me whispered, "This is it. This is the legacy. Not a show, not a book, but a door held open for the next person in line." "I'm honored," I said. "Let's do it." The launch was quiet. No press. Just a brunch at the park with the first 3 recipients women older than I was, when everything fell apart. Brave, tired, determined. I gave a short speech. But more than that, I listened. And I realized something profound. The story was never just mine. It was ours. All of us who had survived the unspeakable. All of us who had loved too long, given too much, and finally come back to ourselves. After the brunch, Everett and I walked home. "You think it's enough?" I asked. He looked at me. "For them? Number for me. For my life. Everything I've done." He stopped walking, turned to face me. "Fran," he said softly, "it's more than enough." And I believed him, because sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do after decades of silence, sacrifice, and sorrow is believe that she's done enough, and that maybe, just maybe, she deserves what comes next. People ask me, sometimes, if I ever think about how things could have gone. If Caleb and Maddie had made different choices. If I had stayed silent. If the slap had never happened, and the wedding had ended with cake and dancing instead of police reports and headlines. And the truth is, of course I do. We all visit the ghost of the road not taken now and then. But I've learned something in these last few years. Something I wish someone had told me when I was younger, scared, and determined to hold everything together with brittle fingers. Sometimes the breaking is the blessing, because it reveals what was hollow, what was fragile, what could never hold you the way you deserve to be held. And in its place, if you're brave, if you're patient, if you let the light in, you get to build something real. Not perfect, but real. Today, my house is quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, not fearful, but full of space. Everett's in the garden, talking to the tomatoes again. Caleb is coming over later. He brings his own mug now, calls ahead, offers to do the dishes even when I tell him not to. The scholarship fund has helped 12 women so far. Next month, we'll meet the 13th. She's 58, from Alabama, going back to school to become a therapist. Says she wants to help women who feel invisible. Says she learned about the program from some show her niece made her watch. I still get letters, mostly from strangers. Sometimes from people I used to know. They write about mothers, daughters, boundaries, regret, but mostly they write about hope. That's the thing no one tells you about getting older, how much of it depends on hope. Not naive hope, not blind, but the kind that says, it's not too late to start again, not too late to forgive, not too late to bloom. Even now, even still, I'm 72, and I'm finally at peace with the fact that I'll never get back what I lost. But I've also gained something better than vindication or applause. I've gained clarity. I know who I am. I know what I've survived. And I know that the woman who stood up at a wedding and shattered a silence 30 years long, she saved my life. So if you're reading this or listening, and you're holding something in your chest that feels like it might eat you alive if you let it out. Let it out. Say it. Survive it. And when you're ready, live. Not because someone said you could, Not because the world made room for it, but because you decided you're worth the room. Because you are. You always were. You just forgot for a little while. And maybe now, finally, you remember. What did you feel while listening to this story all the way through? If it touched your heart, leave the number 1 inch the comments. If you didn't feel connected to it, feel free to write 0. Every piece of feedback means a lot to me, because it's thanks to you that I can keep going. It's from your responses that I draw the energy to tell the next chapter a new story is coming, even deeper, even more moving. And I truly hope you'll be there to listen with me.